Good evening, everybody. I'm Derek Michaud, and a couple weeks ago, I was asked, "Why am I not looking directly into the camera?" Well, the reason being is because I was in Florida, and the way I was set up was I was looking this way because that's how it was set up. Now I'm straight on. I'm back home in my main studio with my actual better sounding mic. And this is Flush in the Pocket presented by Brunswick. And I have a great guest tonight, former PBA tournament director, Corey Kistner. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing very well, doing great.
Thanks.
So thank
Thanks
you
for
so
having
much
me.
for doing this. So I guess real quick, give a background. When were you, and we'd probably get into it anyway, but when were you the tournament director on the PBA tour?
I worked for the PBA from 2003, the 2003-4 season, through the end of the 2011 Senior Tour season. So it was a full 8 years, and then I started dating my wife, got engaged, and we realized that me being on the road 35 weeks out of the year wasn't going to work with a family. So
Mhm.
on to different endeavors. But it was a great 8 years.
There we go. So that is awesome. So let's get started because we're gonna do something totally different that we've never done in our flush in the pocket segment. We'll get to that coming up in a little bit. But first off, how did you get started in bowling?
Well, my uncle will tell you I was 2 years old with a little plastic pins and plastic ball. I have a picture of that somewhere.
Mhm.
I would say, though, when I first got started in an actual bowling league, I was 7. My dad got me started in it. My parents got me started in it, and I just fell in love with the sport. So I've been bowling league since I was 7 up until now.
That is really cool. So when I started, I know this podcast isn't about me, but when I started, I actually put a hole in my parents' wall because I would throw it like a real bowling ball, even though it was like a 2 ounce, whatever, Fisher Price plastic ball. But did you have a coach or were you self taught?
Definitely not self-taught. Um, my two-handed game, I've been a lot self-taught, but when I started bowling, when I was a kid at Rockwood Lanes. Shout out to Rockwood Lanes in Gresham, Oregon. That's where I grew up. I had a lot of great youth coaches there. I remember Emil Benz and Tony Burke and Gary Markham, some of my favorites from when I was very first starting. But I would say that my longtime coach, Mick McMahon, out in Portland, he's still coaching to this day. He's coached some great bowlers over the years. And the great thing about Coach Mick is that he's more than just a bowling coach. He's a life coach. He's there for you when you need somebody to talk to. He's like a father figure to so many youth bowlers,
Mhm.
and just a great guy on and off the lanes. And he's definitely done a lot for bowling and the youth bowling, especially in the Portland area.
Now, is he at, and I know people are going to say that think I'm going to say Bayside, but I'm not. Is he, is that Hollywood Bowl?
No, Mick's been kind of all over the place, and we're talking about Portland, Oregon now,
Right.
not
No, no,
Bayside or
exactly.
Portland, Maine. But
Exactly.
no, he's coached at Valley Lanes, Canby Bowl, Wilsonville Lanes. Gosh, the list probably goes on. He'll coach anybody, anywhere, and again, just a phenomenal coach and a great person in general.
Great. So, what bowling accomplishment did you um, made you say it was time you were ready to try the tour?
Well, I wouldn't say bowling accomplishments because um, I was a tournament director out there, not a bowler. Although I am a
Mhm.
PBA member now, and I bowled full time in the Midwest region last year. But I think as far as going to work for the PBA, I think having that bowling knowledge, and I also ran a lot of tournaments as a youth bowler in my younger years too. I ran a lot of tournaments. I helped my dad run a very popular charity bowling tournament every year that he ran, and I love bowling, or I love running tournaments. I
Mhm.
enjoy running tournaments almost as much as I love bowling, and um, so when I had the opportunity to do that for a living, it was kind of a dream come true.
So the PBA rules, were they your rules or were they the tournament's rules and you just had to enforce them?
Well, I wouldn't say they were my rules. I mean, the PBA was around for a long time before I ever became an employee. So some of those rules, when I started with the PBA, were obviously the rules were already in place. There were some things that came up over the course of time and still do today. I mean, bowlers, like any athletes, they're going to find a way to skirt the rules or bend the rules or find loopholes in the rules. And as those things come up, you change or modify rules that might be outdated or not be needed anymore, those type of things. So we did make some changes over the years, but I wouldn't necessarily say rules were my rules.
Mhm.
They were the PBA's rules, and there was oftentimes a lot of feedback from bowlers. Kirk Von Kruger, who was my boss, late in my PBA career, we had Tom Clark as a commissioner, Fred Schreier before him. So there's a lot of input that goes into rules. It's not like somebody just comes up and says, "Oh, I'm going to have a new rule this week, and we're going to do that." There's definitely some discussion and feedback and input from everyone involved.
Oh, okay. So did you dream about being a pro bowler one day, and who did you look up to while you were either dreaming of being a pro?
Yeah, I pretty much wanted to be a professional bowler my entire life. When I was a kid, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to bowl as much as I could, however often as I could. I remember one time I was probably 10, 11 years old, something like that. And I remember being at my grandpa's house, and he was asking me, he's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, professional bowler. And he's like, well, what happens if that doesn't work out? Like, what else do you want to do? And I looked at him probably like he had 7 heads. Like, what do you mean if that doesn't work out? Like, there's no other option. That's what I'm going to do. Obviously, I never bowled for a living, but I still had the opportunity to work for the PBA, which, in my opinion, was just as good. I still got to live the dream of working out there and being on tour with the best bowlers in the world. And I learned so much during the time I was out there, and I try to incorporate that into my own bowling now. As I'm trying to get ready for the PBA 50 tour here myself in a couple of years. So that's going to be living my dream here in a couple of years is a chance to bowl on the PBA 50 tour.
What a cheater. He doesn't even look old enough to be 50, so there you go.
2 years, 2 years.
Are you 52? Yeah.
No, in 2 years. I'm 48. I just turned 48.
Gotcha. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Well, cool. So let me see here. You mentioned being asked at a young age what you want to be when you grow up, and saying, you say you want to be a pro bowler. That, I think I said the same thing. And I know Kelly Kulick said the same thing. And that's a dangerous question to answer, because the teacher like, well, what if, so yeah, I mean, but kudos to you for working for the PBA. I mean, that's incredible. How old were you when you started to get good?
I'll let you know when I start to get good.
Oh, really? Okay.
That's kind of a subjective question. I don't know. I mean, I still work really hard to get better, and there's certainly a lot of areas that I can improve on to be better. Good is relative, but I think I would say I probably started to have, success relative to my peers anyway. Probably when I was, 9, 10, 11 years old. I was, I'm not going to say I was the best, because I wasn't, but, above average. And so I started to have some successes when I was younger, and I just love the game. So as far as, getting good, I think that's a relative question, and I'm still trying to get good.
Well, okay. So how old were you when you first averaged 200?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I was probably 14 or 15, maybe. Somewhere around there, 14, 15, 16. And now keep in mind, that was before nuclear reactive bowling balls, right?
Sure.
So, averaging 200 in the late 80s and early 90s was pretty good for anybody. I mean, not just a youth bowler, but we had some youth bowlers in our area that, 15, 16 years old that were averaging 220 back then. And I wasn't to their level, but like I said, I was above average. We'll just put it there. I wasn't the best, but I was competitive.
So when did you first get on any ball staff or any shirt staff or anything like that?
That was the year I I quit working for the PBA actually. Dave Bernhardt with Turbo. Shout out to Dave. He's been phenomenal for me over the years. Back when they first came out with the switch grips, he asked me to try them. That was before I switched to two-handed, so I was using my thumb then. And he asked me to try the switch grips, and I really, really liked them. I thought it was a great product. I still think it's a great product, although I don't use switch grips because I don't use my thumb anymore. I thought it was a great product, and I was like, wow, this is really nice. And installed all switch grips in all of my equipment. And then when I quit working for the PBA, I got a hold of Dave, and I was like, well, I'm not a PBA employee anymore because PBA staff are not allowed, or at least then. I don't know if that's the case anymore, but then PBA staff were not allowed to be on any kind of ball staff. There's conflict of interest there, which that makes sense. So when I quit working for the PBA, I got a hold of Dave, and I'm like, so how do you get on staff? How does a bowler get on staff? And he's like, you want to be on Turbo staff? And I said, I'd love to be on Turbo staff. And he's like, all right, you're on staff. And the rest is history. I've been using Turbo products ever since. And, obviously I'm a little bit biased, but I do think that Turbo grips and Turbo accessories are the best on the market. And whether or not I was on staff, I'm pretty certain I'd be using them today.
So how does it, so I know that with a ball staff, I think you get one of every new release. Say if you're on Storm staff or Brunswick staff, I think you get the newest release from Brunswick, and then any other brand of Brunswick, you have to write down what you want, or something like that. But how does a grip staff like that work? How do do you have to pay for your grips, or do they just constantly send you stuff?
Well, I don't want to disclose terms of contracts specifically because every bowler's contract is different. So, I do get an allotment of accessories and grips every year. But again, every staffer is different. So I really don't want to get into specific details. Same thing with Rotogrip. I've been with Rotogrip since January of 2016. And again, they've treated me amazingly. I've had a lot of success with Rotogrip equipment, Storm equipment, and now 900 Global as well. And, I'm going to continue to support the brands that support me. And I appreciate that they've put some faith in me to allow me to use their equipment.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely not trying to ruffle any feathers. Just, yeah. How old were you when you first shot your 300, and what were the nerves like for your first 300 or 800?
I was 18 years old. It was a youth tournament at Valley Lanes. I'll never forget it. Lanes 15 and 16 at Valley Lanes in Beaverton, Oregon. And it was a youth doubles tournament. My partner and I had bowled terrible the first two games. That's one thing I do remember. I also remember that for whatever reason, and I don't know why, because a lot of my family didn't really come to tournaments that much. But for some reason, my entire family was there. My mom, my dad, my aunt, my uncle, my grandma, grandpa's. I must have had 12 people there watching me bowl that tournament. And we get to our third game of qualifying, and we're both bowling terrible. And I don't know, something clicked, and I started stringing strikes. And I'll never forget I don't remember my last shot of the 300, but for some reason I remember my 10th shot because I rolled a 2-pin. And it was one of those feelings like as soon as I rolled the 2-pin, the first shot in the 10th, I knew at that moment I was going to shoot 300. If I got that break, I was going to shoot 300. And I did. And my whole family was there to see it. And it was definitely an awesome memory. And I don't take anything away from anybody who shoots their first 300 because your first 300, the feeling of that is just amazing.
What lane did you shoot? What lane was your 10th frame on?
It was the right lane. It was lane 16 at Valley Lanes in Beaverton.
Okay. All right. So what about your first 800? What was that like?
My first 800 would come a lot of years later. I didn't shoot 800 until I switched to two-handed, actually. I had shot 790 numerous times, or in the 790s numerous times, and it was one of those things where I felt like I was never going to shoot 800. I'd already had several 300s, but never at 800, and I'm like, how am I supposed to shoot 800? And it was in 2012, at Spare Time Lanes in Decatur, and it was just in league, and I started with the front four, and then I split, went off the sheet for 266, and then the next game I did exactly the same thing. I went front four, split off the sheet for 265. So I was 531 turning the corner, and then I shot 300 the last game for 831, which was my first 800. So that was 37 years old. So a lot of years between my first 300 and my first 800.
So I feel like a lot of people switch to two-handed because of Jason Belmonte. And that might be the case with you. It may not be. I don't think it is, but what was it? What made you say, okay, I need to go from one-handed to two-handed?
Well, it was Jason Belmonte. We were in Buffalo, New York for a tour stop, and I was working for the PBA at the time. And a lot of times, while guys were bowling the pro-ams, if there were lanes open, I had to be there for the pro-ams anyway. So if there were lanes open, I'd go down and try and practice a little bit and just bowl as much as I could. And he was bowling that particular pro-am squad. When they got done, he came down to where I was practicing, and he was actually trying to work with me a little bit on my arm swing, because anyone who knew me as a one-handed bowler knew my arm swing was a train wreck. And so he was trying to work with me on my arm swing a little bit. And I got really, really frustrated because I couldn't do what he was trying to get me to do. And I picked up a ball and I just said, you know what, Belmo, I should just bowl like you. I threw one two-handed, never, ever tried it before that. I threw one two-handed, and I came back off the approach, and he looked at me and he's like, Corey, of course I can't speak Australian with the accent, but he's like, Corey, have you ever tried bowling two-handed before? And I said, no, it's the first time I've ever tried it. And he looked at me and he's like, you should never bowl one-handed again. It was kind of in jest, but kind of not in jest. And I haven't. At that time, I wasn't bowling leagues. I wasn't bowling tournaments. I was just bowling for fun, basically. And so I did. I started practicing throwing it two-handed. He helped me a little bit with, holding the ball, what to do with my left hand. And when we came back off a tour that year, I practiced a couple hours a day, probably, trying to get my timing down and things like that. Now, I don't throw it like a traditional two-hander. I kind of fancy myself as a hybrid, because when people watch me from behind, they don't even realize I'm throwing it with two hands. And I've just stuck with it. It made bowling a lot more fun, regardless of the results. My first game of league two-handed was 114. So, but it didn't matter because I was having fun. Bowling didn't feel like work. And when I started having more fun, I was bowling two-handed and I was having more fun. And I really tell that to a lot of people, whether you're a fan of two-handed bowling or not. The bottom line is, with our sport at really any level, is you have to enjoy what you're doing. And if bowling two-handed allows you to enjoy the game, then bowl two-handed. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. Enjoy the game, have fun, and bowl whatever your style is. I don't care if you kick the ball down the lane. If that's how you want to bowl, then that's your style.
Yeah. Better have good shoes if you're going to do that. And so you might have already answered it, but are you a Jason Belmonte two-hander where you're doing like a whole bunch of rev rate deep inside all the time? Or are you kind of more like Kyle Troop, where you just straight up the boards? Because it seems like he's a kind of a down and in two-hander, right?
I would say neither. Bill Spigner, who I've worked with a little bit recently, he's compared me to Chris Vai. So if you look at videos of Chris Vai and you look at some videos of me, which we've done some comparisons when I was working with Bill, you'll see some similarities. So if you're going to compare me to anybody, it would be Chris Vai.
Yeah. People, two-handed is a thing. You got to respect it. I know there's some pros that are traditionalists. Oh, it's travesty and all this stuff. But hey, listen, as long as you keep your foot behind the foul line, I have no problem with it.
I agree.
Yeah. So you did answer the question. How old were you when you shot your first 800? You said 37. So now I know that you were a tournament director on the PBA tour. You weren't a bowler, but what was your best moment on tour as a PBA tournament director?
Uh, that's a really tough question because there were so many great moments out there. To be able to witness history in person, there's really nothing like it. I would say though, a couple of my most memorable moments would be working my first PBA tournament ever. Would be one of my best. I remember it was in Council Bluffs, Iowa, just outside of Omaha, Thunder Bowl
Mm-hmm.
in Council Bluffs, and I remember walking in there and seeing all the guys and being in the locker room, and Kirk Von Kruger and Eric Holbein, who was the assistant tournament director at the time, going into the locker room, especially the first day for the first roll call, and Kirk introducing myself and Eric Holbein as Eric was the assistant tournament director, I was the tournament official, was my title then, and just kind of looking at all of these players, Walter Ray and Mike Albee and Norm Duke and Pete Weber, and I mean just the legends go on. They're looking at me now, and I'm a tournament official, and now I have to enforce rules or prepare tournaments for all these people that I looked up to when I was a kid. It was kind of an overwhelming moment, to be honest. So that was definitely one. I would say that during my career, though, one of the best moments for me also was being on the committee to decide the 50 greatest players of all time in
Mm-hmm.
2008-2009 season for our 50th anniversary season.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of a big responsibility and something I took very, very seriously. And then after I quit working for the PBA, I was fortunate enough, the PBA contacted me and asked me to be on the committee to help determine the 60 greatest moments in PBA history for the 60th anniversary, which was just a few years ago as well,
Mm-hmm.
in the 18-19 season. And that was an honor too. And then I would say that, the other moments that I can remember is my last tournament, working as a tournament director. It was a very emotional day. It was at Capri Lanes, Dayton, Ohio. It was the last senior tour stop of the season. All of the senior tour bowlers got together, and they threw me kind of a going away party, and they all chipped in and bought me a really nice watch, and
Mm-hmm.
that Dave Bernhardt presented to me. And that was a pretty special moment as well. So there's really a lot that I could say that are pretty special, but in general, just witnessing history and seeing replays now of PBA shows of tour tournaments past, that I can say that I was a tournament director for that tournament, for this or that, whatever that historical moment was, is kind of cool.
So, if you'll allow me, a tournament that will always stick in my mind that you were a part of was the 2005 Tournament of Champions, when Randy Peterson was going through what he was going through, when he was distracted. He needed 3 strikes in the 10th to tie Norm Duke, I believe, and he gets the first one or something like that, and somebody is distracting him. Apparently, he says your name, and he's talking about some guy wearing in yellow distracting him. What? And then, of course, the shot where he leaves a shaker 7 that could have very easily struck. What happened in that tournament that distracted Randy? Do you know? I mean, can you talk about it? Do you want to talk about it? What happened?
Well, I can't say that I remember that specific incident, because visual distractions were pretty common on the show, when you have people sitting down lane on both sides,
Mhm.
and really any kind of movement can distract those guys, and especially if it's constant. If there's somebody that's just being real like fidgety or whatever, they might look at me and say, can you do something about that? Can you move them or something? And we those are paying ticket holders, right? They paid to have
Mhm.
that seat, and we certainly can ask them to sit still, and we do, and be quiet, and all those kind of things. But ultimately, the bowlers got to deal with whatever they got to deal with. If we don't want fans just like blurting things out like at the last second, which that really never happened. But if it's egregious or if it's blatant or, fans legitimately trying to distract somebody, then we can take action. But if it's not intentional, there's really nothing that we can do.
Right. What was your worst moment on tour? I guess, like we said, you're a tournament director. So what was one of your worst moments?
My worst moment was I was fired for about 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get into the details of it. It happened in Indianapolis, and Tom Clark, if you're watching, I hope you are. I hope you're doing well. We talked quite a bit lately, or we do now, but there was a tournament in Indianapolis. I don't remember what year it was, but let's just say that I said and did something really stupid, and I regret it to this day. Anyway, Tom kind of stormed out of the office, and my boss, Kirk, he came up to me and he's like, "Tom wants you to leave right now." I'm like, all right. So I did. Kirk got a hold of me later that night, and we kind of talked about what happened, and he's like, "Look, we're in Columbus next week. I think you should sit down with Tom and try and work this out." And we did, and so I lost my job for a few hours. Went to Columbus. We talked it out. I kind of explained, where I was coming from, but it was definitely my mistake. It was definitely my screw up. And if I was on Tom's side of the fence, I would have done exactly the same thing and been like, you get out of here. And hindsight's 2020. I wish I wouldn't have done and said what I did, but things happen. I don't have an excuse. I'm not going to make excuses. If I was a bowler at that time, I probably would have been fined or suspended for what I did and said. So, I got what I deserved, and I worked a few more years after that, and it was good. And today, I think Tom and I have a pretty good relationship, and hopefully he's watching, and I can apologize to him again, but things are pretty good now with our, I was fortunate enough, and after I quit working for the PBA, that they actually contracted me a couple more times to work other tournaments as a private contractor. So that was a good opportunity. So that was my worst moment on tour. Definitely is just my mouth acting before my brain.
So, question 11 is, when did you become a PBA tournament director? We talked about that at the beginning, but how did that come about? One more time, I guess.
Well, so when I started working for the PBA, I was in the Marine Corps. I had gotten out of the Marine Corps. I was going to college at Oregon State University. Of course, big PBA fan. I followed the PBA like a hawk. I watched Del Ballard's, or not watched, I guess listened to, back when they used to have Strike Pass. Del Ballard had a show called Gutter Talk, which I listened to every week. And, I would submit questions and things like that. That was kind of pre-podcast, if you will. But he had a show, and I listened to it all the time. And I remember, Kirk Von Kruger, who ended up being my boss, was a guest on that show once. And anyway, the PBA posted a couple of job postings for the assistant tournament director and a tournament official. And I applied for both of them, and they required a college degree. I was still in college at the time because I had been in the Marine Corps for a few years, and I'd gotten out and I was going back to school. And I knew that I believe I had the experience necessary because I had run tournaments. I'd been in the bowling business for a few years anyway. I worked in a pro shop part-time while I was in the Marine Corps. So, I wasn't removed from the bowling industry at all. And I noticed that the email addresses for all the PBA staff was first name dot last name and then @pba.com. So I knew Chris Peters was the owner, one of the Microsoft guys, the owners of the PBA. I didn't know Kirk personally. I didn't know anybody that was on staff personally, but I knew that with my resume not having a degree that they wanted, that my resume would probably just get, it would just get tossed aside. And, they posted it online, so people are going to be applying from all over the country. And so I took a chance. and I took a chance with sending Chris Peters an email directly. And ultimately that worked, because I got a phone call from Kirk Von Kruger shortly thereafter. And he basically said, I see you're in the Marine Corps, but you apparently don't know anything about chain of command. And he told me that, that was a pretty ballsy move to email an executive with the Professional Bowlers Association about getting a job. And basically what I said in my email is like, look, I've applied for these positions. I don't have the degree that you want, but here are the reasons why I think I could be successful with your organization. And I would, I'll do whatever it takes. If you want me to sweep the floors, if you want me to clean the windows in the office, I'll do whatever it takes. I just want to get my foot in the door and prove that I can be a good tournament director, and I can be an asset to the Professional Bowlers Association. And that was enough to get me an interview. And I guess you could say the rest is history. I went through a couple of interviews, went to Seattle a couple of times, met with Steve Miller, met with Kirk Von Kruger, and they ultimately offered me the tournament official position. And then I was promoted to assistant tournament director the year after that. And then I took over the senior tour in 2005. And then my title became a tournament director for the PBA Tour and PBA Senior Tour for the last 6 years of my PBA career.
Excellent. And if you are, since you've given a couple shout outs, I will, if you don't mind, I'd like to give one, Chris Peters, Mike Slade, and Rob Glazier. Thank you for your service as owners of the PBA. I mean, that was fun times. And Steve Miller as well. Steve Miller was amazing. What a great speaker he was. Yeah.
He was a great motivator, and I thoroughly enjoyed working for him for my time when he was there.
When you watch that, I don't know if you ever saw the League of Ordinary Gentlemen, but when you see his little meeting about budgets and salaries, and you don't have a right to bowl, you've been given the ability because of your talent. That whole speech, that was phenomenal. It really was.
Yeah. I don't know that the players really liked it that much, but I thought it was great. And yes, I have a copy of that DVD as well.
Yeah, I got it on my Xbox. So what was the best thing about being a tournament director?
I think the travel and the experiences. I got to go to all kinds of places that I wouldn't have even thought about going, and had the opportunity to go to Japan, which is amazing, by the way, if you ever get the chance, if you haven't been there already. I mean, going to Japan for the Japan Cup, just the experiences and going to all the different places around the country that I never would have had the opportunity to go or never had been to in the past, and just meeting so many different people. And one thing about the bowling community is it's a great community no matter where you go. And, I think Bayside in Portland is a perfect example of that, and in how the fans and the community can embrace the Professional Bowlers Association. And, I think it was a little bit different. It doesn't have the excitement environment for like TV that Bayside did, but I always think about Medford, Oregon being that way, because whenever you went anywhere in town, they knew that the PBA was there, and the hospitality was just off the charts.
Yeah. One of my all-time favorite tournaments was in Medford when Pete Weber beat Tommy DeLutz. Oh, that was I remember Pete Weber was lost in the match against Lonnie Wallachek, ends up, bowling 197, beats him because of a bad break by Lonnie, but and then to adjust his line and then go 260 to 250. I mean, that was I love that tournament. That was a great tournament. What was the worst thing about being a tournament director?
I think the worst thing about being a tournament director, and this is not just PBA tournaments, this is, any tournaments, is that you can't make everybody happy. Bowlers are bowlers, and somebody's going to be unhappy about something in every tournament you run. And there's, no matter how hard you try, you just can't make everybody happy. And one of the things that Kirk Von Kruger told me early on in my career was that you can make most of the bowlers happy most of the time. You can make some of the bowlers happy some of the time, but you can make none of the bowlers happy all of the time. And that's really good advice for me. I carry that with me to this day, running tournaments. And I think that's the hardest thing about just being a tournament director is you just can't make everybody happy. There's always going to be somebody unhappy about something, and there's just nothing you can do about it. So you just have to do the best you can and offer the best experience you can for the bowlers.
Right. So I know that we've talked quite a bit off air, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And you told me a story about Amleto Monticelli that I probably shouldn't have dropped names, but we won't get into that one. But was there anybody else that that gave you a hard time as a tournament director?
Yeah. And in fact, I think I told you about it, and I still have it here on paper. Can you see that? Can you see that, what that says?
1 second here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not going to mention who that was. I save it to this day, and if I ever see him again, I'm going to ask him to autograph that for me. But back when we had the exempt tour, where you just had your 64 players every week, filling pro-ams or having enough bowlers for pro-ams was extremely difficult because they bowled. The pro-ams were on Wednesday night, so they had practice on Wednesday morning. They would have usually a pro-am, maybe 2 on Wednesday night, Wednesday afternoon. They would bowl on Thursday, match play on Friday, and then they would have pro-ams all day on Saturday, and then you had the TV show on Sunday. So what made that difficult for the bowlers, it was great for the fans because all the pro-ams, or the majority of the pro-ams, are on the weekend. So it made it easier for them to be there for the pro-ams. It also gave our TV crews a full day of prep for the shows. But when we would get done on Friday, guys would get done on Friday and they bowled for the week. It might be stressful. They may have just missed a show or missed a cut or something, and they want to get out of there. They want to go to the next stop and whatever it is. And I would get a lot of requests for bowlers, hey, can I take this weekend off? Or, can I get out of this one? And that was a weekly battle for me because, we needed pretty much everybody. And most of the guys had to bowl 2 pro-ams a week. And it was hard. And so I had a bowler that he asked me for the week off. And I said, we're full. I need everybody. If you can find somebody to cover your pro-ams, I'm okay with that. But no, I can't just let you out. I don't have anybody else to replace you. And everyone's already bowling 2 pro-ams. So, for him to be let out, then somebody else is going to have to bowl 4 pro-ams, or two guys are going to have to bowl 3 pro-ams or whatever it is. And he was not happy. He was livid, in fact. And I didn't know that this was him at the time. So we go to Dallas the next week, and I post the pro-am assignments for the week. And it was another bowler that was like, hey, did you see that message that somebody left you on the pro-am assignments? And I was like, no. So I went in and I saw that, and I was, oh man, that was easily the most unhappy I'd ever been as a tournament director. Like I was beside myself, upset, mad, angry. Like, who would do that? Did these guys forget, who it is that pays their prize money? And the exempt guys were guaranteed $2,000 a week then. So it's not like they missed the cut, didn't cash, and have to bowl a pro-am. They still made $2,000 that week. I understand from a bowler standpoint that you didn't make the cut, you want to go home or whatever, but it's the same for everyone. So when we got to the next stop, which I believe we were in Birmingham at Lightning Strikes in Alabama, at roll call that week, I held up, I kept this paper and I held it up in roll call, and I basically just unloaded on everybody in roll call. And I gave them the whole spiel about, these pro-am bowlers are why you have guaranteed money every week. This is why you have a guaranteed check every week. This is why you can bowl for a living. These people are, they're there because they want to see you. They want to spend time with you. They want to meet you, that whole thing. And after I did that, that bowler came up to me, came into the tournament office, admitted he did it. He apologized, and great guy on tour. I was actually really surprised at who it was. And it was fine after that. But yeah, that was definitely that was definitely not a good moment.
Yeah. Now, bowlers have to wear their names on the back of their shirts for the pro-ams, right? Because I remember, if I can drop a name, if that's okay with you,
Sure.
TJ, I guess I guess I don't know. I think he had either had an injury or there was a pro-am he didn't bowl because he didn't have any, I guess, clothes, name on the back or whatever. Um, do they have to wear the name on the back of their shirt for a pro-am, or can they just wear whatever? Or
No, they have to be in proper tournament
Mhm.
attire, just like they're bowling in qualifying or match play. It's no different. So yes, they have to have be in proper attire with their name shirt
Mhm.
for all the pro-am squads.
All right. So now, all right. So being a tournament director, um, I'm actually very glad to talk to you because this is something I've always wanted to know. And back in 1999, the U.S. Open was in Milford, Connecticut, and I was there for the Saturday event, the bracket matches that they had. And then when I was watching the show, they were talking about how the ladies for the PWBA were allowed 5 re-racks during the week, and I can't remember how many the men were, but they had to compromise, and um, they were allowed 3 re-racks during the week. You're allowed 2 on. I mean, I should just let you take over this, but how many re-racks is a bowler allowed a week during the qualifying and match play versus TV now, or when you were tournament director?
Well, it hasn't changed, and it's 2 re-racks per game, period. So there's no set number for the week. It's per game. 2 re-racks per game in qualifying, 2 re-racks per game in match play, 2 re-racks per game on TV. That's a standard rule, and there's no exceptions. So if you
Mhm.
take your 2 re-racks, and as long as there's 10 pins on the deck, it doesn't matter if they're set up in a circle. If you've already taken your 2 re-racks, you got to shoot the rack. Back, you were talking about Milford, Connecticut with the U.S. Open. I believe that was when the BPAA still ran the U.S. Open.
Mhm.
So that was, they might have had separate rules in qualifying, like the Masters does this week. It counts as a PBA title, but the Masters is still a USBC owned and operated tournament. And then when you get to the TV show, PBA rules apply otherwise. So if there's any conflict, PBA rules will trump USBC rules on the show. So, I think that the U.S. Open was the same way back in '99. So there may have been a different re-rack rule for that tournament specifically, but it still would have counted as a PBA title. Now, at some point after that, I don't know what year, but the PBA took ownership and ran the U.S. Open. So it was a PBA event from beginning to end. And I believe now that the U.S. Open is back in the hands of the USBC.
So, what is the re-rack rule? Um, I guess how do I get a re-rack on TV or during the week?
Well, during qualifying, you just want to let somebody on your pair know that you're taking a re-rack, and there's a checkbox on the recap sheet to mark it. So you got to mark on your sheet. In match play, you also same thing. You need to notify your opponent that you're taking a re-rack. They will mark it on your sheet, and then on TV, you have to ask the tournament director that you want to take a re-rack. And where it's different on TV versus the rest of the week is it has to be your first order of business. So as soon as it's your turn, you can't be dilly-dallying around. You need to look at the rack, and if you're going to take a re-rack, you have to take a re-rack. Even if you're trying to stall or delay or give yourself more time, you still have to make it your first order of business.
Mhm. So during the week, do you have to make it your first order of business?
Not no, but that was never a problem. The guys
Mhm.
didn't, during the week, guys aren't taking re-racks um, just for the sake of taking re-racks. During the week, if they're taking re-racks, it's probably because it's legitimately a bad rack.
Mhm.
In match play, they may take a re-rack for some more time, but on TV, you see a lot more re-racks just because of the shot clock being in play and
Mhm.
in the time rules with TV and everything. They might want to give themselves a little bit more time or even delay their opponent a little bit if they can.
Mhm.
So really don't see any problems with re-racks during the week. It was, TV shows where guys are asking for the most re-racks.
Okay. Yeah. So what was a PBA rule that you agree with?
All of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, I always say that rules are in place for a reason. I wouldn't say that there's any rules that I agree with more than other rules that I agree with.
Mm-hmm.
There might be some rules that I disagree with, but I think for the most part, the rules that are in place for a reason. And as I mentioned before, if something came up and there was, not a reason to have that rule, we would eliminate it or modify it or change the penalty of it or something of that nature.
Mm-hmm. So was there a rule that you did not agree with?
Yeah. There's some rules that I disagree with. It's one of those things where I don't agree, but I understand, kind of thing. Back when I'll use the dye sublimated jerseys, for example, when the dye sublimated jerseys first came out in, I think it was 2008, there was a lot of confusion of what was allowed and what wasn't allowed. And basically Gemini, when we had dye sublimated jerseys, the Gemini company, they had exclusive rights to dye sublimation for the PBA Tour competition. But there were all kinds of other companies that were making dye sublimated jerseys. And, bowlers thought those were the coolest things when they first came out. I mean, they still are. I mean, they're different. They're,
I'm talking about these.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So bowlers would show up to tournaments with all these other dye sublimated jerseys with their names embroidered, and we would have to tell them they couldn't wear them because Gemini had exclusive rights, and there was a learning curve there with the bowlers in understanding what they could and couldn't wear when it came to shirts. And there was definitely a lot of confusion, and that was a hard time because people would show up and they'd be like, I spent $200 on these and now I can't wear them. So, that was one thing where it was really hard to have to tell bowlers that they couldn't wear a shirt that they spent $100 on.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the rule, and I had to enforce it.
So what was not a PBA rule that should have been?
Was not a PBA rule that should have been. I don't know that it would be a rule per se, but I definitely think that PBA school needs to come back that teaches rules so that we don't have a lot of confusion, because there are some rules variations between USBC and PBA rules. There's definitely variations on product registration and understanding product registration and what equipment you can and can't use in PBA competitions. So I don't know that I can say specifically that there's a rule that should be, but I definitely think that that PBA school needs to come back that teaches PBA members or new PBA members rules.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So that's the regular questions. And for some reason, I wanted to do something different with you because why not? I'm pretty sure you've never bowled a 900.
I've never bowled a 900. 34 out of 36. It's the closest I've gotten.
So what's your high sanction set?
847.
847. That's amazing. So what I usually do is when I first started this podcast, because a lot of people are like, hey, you should do a bowling podcast. And I was like, I don't know what to call it, how to do it, whatever. And then I was just like, first I was going to do 10 in the pit. And then I'm like, flush in the pocket. So when I had my first guest was Andrew Pfeffer, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do, instead of a lot of people do 10 frames, random questions, whatever, I'm going to do 12. But because a perfect game is 12 strikes and everything is flushed in the pocket. So, but for some reason for you, I wanted to do 36 because I think you're cool and I wanted to hang out and chat with you for a little bit if you got the time. And so, yeah, it's just 36 random questions. So, Yeah. What's your favorite food?
All right, let's go. Shrimp, cooked anyway, like Bubba Gump.
Uh-huh.
Doesn't matter. Fried, skewered, boiled. It doesn't matter. I love shrimp.
Nice. Favorite music?
It depends on my mood.
Mm-hmm.
When I am alone traveling to tournaments, I'm listening to Metallica radio, hard rock, heavy metal. That kind of gets me pumped up for tournaments. But I also like country, which I didn't used to before. My wife's kind of got me hooked on country, so I like country too. But it really does depend on my mood what my favorite music is at the moment.
Great job, Mrs. Kistner. That is awesome because I am a country guy. Favorite hangout?
Well, a bowling center anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, home is my favorite hangout. I
Mm-hmm.
love to be home. We're gone so much anymore. It seems like we're gone every weekend for bowling tournaments or traveling or visiting family or something. So whenever I can be home on the weekend, it's nice.
Excellent. What do you do to take your mind off of bowling?
Well, I think you had it in your title for me this week: bowling with Lego and chatting with me. So that would be it. I'm a Lego fanatic and collector, and it's been my favorite toy as a kid, and it still is today.
He's jumping the podcast, people. He is. He
I
totally
am.
is.
I know. I apologize, but that's what you called it, so I'm going to go with it.
That's all right. That's all right. This is your podcast now. Best advice ever given.
Well, I'm going to go back to my coach, my youth coach, Mick McMahon. I remember when I was about 16, um, and my average dropped off a cliff. I went from averaging 200, low 200s, and my average dropped down to about 175 or something like that. It was ridiculous when I was around 16 years old, and I didn't know what was happening. I'm like, how did I just forget how to bowl? Like, this doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was working with Mick, and he's like, well, you're growing like an inch a week, and your body and your timing and everything is just jacked up, and you just gotta kind of live through it and deal with it until you stop growing. And I'm like, well, how long is that going to be? And he's like, well, it could be a couple years. And I was like, when you're 16, 2 years is like an eternity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting so frustrated, and I wanted to quit. And Mick, he kind of pulled me aside one day, and he's like, look, if you want to quit, that's fine, but make sure that you're quitting for the right reasons. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, and he asked me, he's like, do you love bowling, or do you like bowling? Do you still enjoy it? And I'm like, yes, I love bowling. I mean, I can't wait to go bowling. I want to go bowl tournaments and leagues, but I'm so frustrated and angry every time I go that I don't want to do it. And he's like, well, if you love it, then if you're going to quit, just make sure you quit for the right reasons. And that's something that has stuck with me, as I mentioned before with him, that goes beyond bowling. That you can apply that to anything you do. So I think that's probably the best piece of advice. And I think another one that I kind of got after the fact, or after I started working for the PBA and reading books and things like that, is really just kind of living in the moment and looking around and be in the present and enjoy where you are and what you're doing. And I think that's one of my biggest regrets working for the PBA, is there were a lot of times where, I was doing a job, which I never felt like being a tournament director was a job, but I'm still doing my work, and I wasn't really taking the time to absorb where I was or what was happening. And, so that's kind of a regret that I look back on. And, there were some things, some historical moments maybe that I could have enjoyed a little bit more had I realized, what was happening at the time.
Okay. So I kind of want to go off the sheet if you'll let me. What was the worst advice ever given? Like advice that are like somebody gives you advice and like, oh, shut up, you're an idiot, and like,
Ah, I don't, hmm, I don't know that I really have that.
okay,
Or
sure.
if I did, I shut it out so I don't remember. Yeah, I don't
Okay.
remember.
So, all right.
Maybe you know what? Now that I say that, it could be um, when I switched to two-handed. There was. You also don't know. I actually bowled left-handed for a little while too, but I think I don't want to call it the worst advice. It's just advice I didn't take, and that is there was a lot of people. that really kind of changed their attitude toward me a little bit when I switched to two-handed, and especially when I started, having a little bit of success bowling two-handed,
Mhm.
because there are so many people out there that are traditionalists and purists or whatever,
Mhm.
uh, that really kind of look down on that. And
Mhm.
I've had a lot of people when I first started doing it and I was practicing a lot that tell me I shouldn't do that. That's not right. It's not fair. It's cheating. Pick whatever word you want. And there was
Mhm.
a lot of people that said I should quit doing that. And so that was advice I didn't take. And again, it goes back to what I said before: is
Mhm.
it was about making bowling fun again. When I started bowling two-handed, scores didn't matter to me. My
Mhm.
average didn't matter to me. I was enjoying bowling again, and that was the most important thing.
There you go. How did you meet your wife?
Um, well, this question needs an asterisk because I met my wife technically when her husband was bowling on tour. So, if you just say it that way, it sounds kind of bad. But they had, I met her while her ex husband was bowling on tour. They had already split up. We were acquaintances, and um, she was already single at that time, and we just kind of connected through Facebook, and we started chatting back and forth. And we had to come to Decatur for a senior tour stop, and I was like, I'm going to be in Decatur next week. You want to go out, hang out, whatever. And the rest is history on that one. Um, I never thought in a million years I would be married and living in Decatur, Illinois. But shout out to my wife Sheila. She's been amazing by my side the whole time, and um, yeah, that's how we met. But like I said, it's not like it sounds. It was definitely after the fact, and very grateful for her.
Yeah, and if anybody wants, and we're obviously not going to reveal names, but if anybody wants to know who we're talking about, just put every Pro Bowler that you know in a hat, and then just draw one and let yourself think, oh, it's that one. Okay, I know who it is, and obviously he knows who it is, but yeah, we're going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, do you let's say favorite bowling ball of all time?
Favorite bowling ball of all time. And I'm not going to say this just because I'm on staff. I'm going to say this because I mean it. The Rotogrip Grenade, and
Mhm.
I'm going to say both of them because they had the original Grenade, which was in the 80s, and I had one of those, and I just loved that ball. Um, and then when the re-release came out in 2010, I drilled a couple of those, and in fact, I shot my first two-handed 300 with a grenade, and so that really sticks with me. So, and again, I'm not saying that just because I'm on staff. I
No,
legitimately think the Rotogrip Grenade is got to be my favorite ball of all time.
nice. Do you go to concerts?
All the time. We've got an amphitheater here in Decatur, the Devon Lakeshore Amphitheater. We get my wife and I had season tickets there a couple years ago. We've got friends of ours that have season tickets, and in the summertime, we're going to about a concert a week. So over the last couple of years, we've been to, I don't know, 50 concerts maybe.
In
Most
the last how
recent
long?
though, we went to see Old Dominion in Champaign here. That was about a month ago. It was a great show.
Did you hear about Matthew Ramsey, the lead singer of Old Dominion?
Did I hear
He,
about him?
yeah, he was
No,
involved in a ATV accident, broke his pelvis in three different places.
I did
We
not
got
hear that.
tickets for their show in Bangor, Maine on April 15. He had to cancel some shows, but luckily that's still on the docket. I wish him well and speedy recovery. And did you said 50 concerts in how long?
I bet we've been to 50 concerts in the last 3 years.
Okay, all right, wow. See, you should
Yeah.
move to Maine. We should totally hang out. This is awesome. Um, so favorite sports team?
Well, Oregon State. I went to Oregon State, so Oregon State Beavers are my team for all sports in college, of course. I think my favorite pro sports team is definitely New York Yankees. I've been a Yankee fan ever since I was a little kid. I'm sorry, I know you're a Red Sox fan, and
Oh,
today's opening day, and the Red Sox are already a game behind. So sorry about that. But New York Yankees. Football, I guess I'm a Bears fan by marriage. And for the NBA, it'd be the Portland Trailblazers, although I really don't follow the NBA much at all.
no NHL?
No, we didn't have any hockey where I grew up. Well, we did. We had the Portland Winterhawks. It was a junior hockey team, and so we did go to a lot of those. But I never really got into hockey.
All right. If you could have dinner with 3 people, living or passed away, who would they be?
Well, I have 2 answers for this.
So 6 people.
So I have 6 people.
Okay. Sure. Go ahead.
So my first 3 are the 3 that I have to say would be my wife, my mom, and my dad.
Okay.
Rest in peace to my father. He passed away 2 years ago this month, or
sorry
two,
for your
2 years
loss.
ago in April. So that's the politically correct answer, because I gotta say my wife, my mom, and my dad. But really, in a hypothetical situation, I have to go with Bobby Knight, Colin Kaepernick, and Rudy Rudiger. And all 3 kind of for similar reasons. And that's, I want to know if their private persona is the same as their public persona. I respect Bobby Knight as a coach. He's obviously done some things that are a little over the top, but he just seems like a guy that is genuine, and I want to know, is he really like the way he comes across? Same kind of thing with Colin Kaepernick. Like, he's like so in left field, and I don't agree with anything that he's done. But again, I want to know, what's he really like? Is he really, does he really want to play football? I don't think he does. Is he just using a political platform for personal gain? I think he does. But I don't know that for sure, because I don't know him personally. And so I think I would like to get to know him personally to see, what he's really like, behind the scenes. And Rudy is kind of the same way. He had a story of his life. It's one of my favorite movies. I know a lot of the movie is true, but I also know that a lot of the movie is Hollywood. So, again, I'd like to know how much of his life story is real life and how much is Hollywood. What's he really like behind the scenes?
And what's the name of the movie?
Rudy.
Just Rudy. Okay.
Rudy. Rudy from Rudy. Rudy.
All right.
You got to know Rudy. Everybody's seen Rudy, right? No?
The host of this podcast has not.
Oh, you better go watch it tonight.
Bruins are on. Priorities. Okay, so what are you binge watching right now?
I'm a big Judge Judy fan.
There we go.
So I watch Judge Judy on repeat all the time. And I'm also a big fan of American Greed. I watch American Greed. I love documentaries, crime documentaries, especially. But those are the 2 shows that I probably watch the most right now.
So I would get, and this is a shameless plug, I can say whatever I want. Nobody's sponsoring this. Well, Brunswick is helping me out, but Discovery Plus is a must, because there's a lot of true crime on there, a whole lot of it, and it's $7 without commercials. So it's a steal. $4.99 with commercials.
I have to check it out.
Oh, absolutely. So let's see. First car.
My first car was a 1979 Dodge Magnum that my parents bought me. That was an absolute tank. I don't know if you know what a Dodge Magnum looks like from that year.
No, not that year, but a buddy of mine used to have one. So
not the newer station wagon version. It was the older sedan version. That thing was like, I don't know. It was an absolute tank. That I think my parents bought it for me because they figured that if I got in an accident, that car would be so big and a steel bodied car that I probably would be safe in it.
Mhm.
But that thing was a piece of junk, man. So
Okay.
yeah, my first car, 1979 Dodge Magnum.
So favorite toy as a child, and we're gonna say I'm gonna add why to this.
Well, Lego, of course.
Mhm.
We already talked
Right.
about that a little bit.
Right.
I think it's because you could really create anything with it,
Mhm.
and it kind of stands the test of time. When with toys, especially, you get toys and kids play with toys, and then they get old, they get tired of a toy in 5 minutes, and they're onto a different toy. And with Lego, you can create different toys. If you want a
Mhm.
car today, you want to play with a car today, you make a car and you play with the car.
Mhm.
Tomorrow, if you want to build a robot and play with a robot, then you have a robot. And then if you're
Mhm.
tired of that, then you can, build something else. And I think it's just the creative aspect of it, and being able to create something different every time.
So do you play Minecraft?
I do not.
Okay. 'Cause it's kind of
I'm
like a
not.
bit
I'm
of a
not a
theme.
big video gamer.
Okay. All right, not a problem. Favorite bowling moment as a fan?
Um, as a fan, well, I didn't get to talk much about Mike Albee earlier, so I'm going to talk about him now.
Former
Mike
guest, go ahead.
Albee. Mike Albee was my definitely my bowling hero growing up. I loved watching Mike Albee bowl. His game was so simple, um, and he had so much success. Everything that my game isn't today. But he is definitely one that I wanted to emulate, and getting to meet him personally, getting to work with him on tour was truly a treat. I mean, he's a true ambassador of the game, and he made me admire him even that much more. So I think as a fan, my most memorable moment was actually being able to work the last. I was worked for the PBA for his last season on tour,
Mhm.
and I thought that was really special. And I think he bowled, which he didn't make the show. And Chris Johnson, if you're out there watching, I hate you for this. But Chris Johnson, if you're out there, I hate you for this, because Mike Albee bowled Chris Johnson for the show in Toledo, and I think that was
Uh-huh.
in 2004. And that Chris won that match, obviously, to make the show, which is Chris Johnson's first show in his rookie year. Kudos to Chris Johnson. He's a phenomenal player. He's rookie of the year that year. But that was the last chance Mike Albee had to make a show. And
Really?
I was so bummed because I wanted to be the tournament director for Mike Albee's last show, and that didn't happen. So it was still a special moment for me to be out there when Mike Albee finished his career. But I wish he would have made that show.
All right, we're gonna put a bolo out for Chris Johnson. That was I remember that tournament, and Mike. I did not know that fact that it was his last shot to make a show, but Mike, I feel like, and I'm not trying to talk about somebody else because they're a buddy of mine, but Mike, I feel like is a Parker Bone 2.0.
one Hundred
You
percent,
won't find two nicer guys than those two right there.
100%.
Yeah. And and you talk about Chris looked when he was bowling for that title, he looked so nervous in that interview. I mean, he was practically shaking. I'll never forget that. That was interesting, definitely. Um, All-time favorite sports moment, not bowling, but just other sports in general.
Um, well, I have a couple, actually. I think I will say I have three,
Mhm.
in no particular order. The most recent for me, and this is a little bit personal and might be a little bit emotional, but as I mentioned, I'm an Oregon State fan in all sports, and Oregon State basketball has a tradition of being absolutely horrible.
Mhm.
Um, a couple years ago, with the whole COVID thing, they made a tremendous run. Um, they hadn't won a tournament game since 1982.
Mhm.
So it had been 39 years since they even won a tournament game, let alone, make it to anywhere in the tournament, um, any kind of success in the tournament. And that was when they had, if you remember a couple years ago in Indianapolis, they had the entire tournament in Indianapolis. which
Okay.
was only only a couple hours from us. So when they made the tournament, they won the Pac-12 tournament to even get in the tournament in the first place. They were going to play in Indianapolis. And so I was like, I can't miss this. So my wife and I got tickets to go see. They played Tennessee in the first round, and they won. And it was incredible because Oregon State was a 12 seed. And of course, there's always a 12 that beats a 5. And Oregon State was a 12 seed. They beat Tennessee, who was the 5 seed. And it was the first tournament win for Oregon State in 39 years. So that was cool. 2 days later, we came back home. We didn't go to the round of 32 game, but they beat Oklahoma State. And I remember talking to my dad. Sorry, I'm going to get a little bit choked up here. I remember talking to my dad after they won that game. And I said, Dad, they're in the Sweet 16. They haven't been to the Sweet 16 in 40 years. My dad's a huge Oregon State fan. He always was. And I was like, you got to come out here. You got to fly out here. We got to go to the Sweet 16 game. And he's like, I don't know. It's, short notice. Flights are going to be expensive. All this hemming and hawing. And I'm like, Dad, when are you? He's been a season ticket holder at Oregon State too for a long time. And I'm like, when are you going to get this opportunity again? I mean, it's been 40 years. What if they make the run? What if they go all the way? It's in Indianapolis. We could be here for the whole thing. So I finally talked my dad into coming out. He did. We went to the Sweet 16 game. They won. They beat Illinois, Chicago, and mother. What's her name? I can't remember what her name is. The nun from Chicago. Anyway, beat them in the round of 16, the Sweet 16, and across the street from the arena, it's a Beaver themed bar. And that was like the headquarters for Oregon State. All of the head coach's family there. Trace Tinkle was there. He's the leading all-time scorer for Oregon State, their whole family. We went over there, partied with them. And then we're like, well, now we got to get tickets to the Elite Eight. And they played Houston in the Elite Eight. They were tied with like a minute and a half to go. They ended up losing. But that was an historic run for Oregon State. That's something they hadn't done in 40 years. And I got to share it with my dad. And my dad passed away 2 weeks later. So that's something, from an all-time favorite sports moment. The Oregon State basketball team going to the Elite Eight was it, because if they didn't go to the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight, my dad wouldn't have come out to visit, and I wouldn't have gotten to see him again. So that was it. I do have two more this really quick. Derek Jeter's final game. You couldn't have scripted that, where he had the game winning hit in the 10th inning. Kind of a career-ending walk-off. And then my wife is a massive Cubs fan, and when they won the World Series in 2016, I got to share that with her, so that was pretty special too.
The Cubs are my National League team, so yeah, go Cubs. And did you see the Derek Jeter captain documentary on Netflix?
Absolutely, yes, that was awesome. And I mean, I think that is like every kid's fantasy dream come true. Like like you can't script that guy's life any more than what happened for him.
He just seems like the nicest guy in the world. He really does. Great name too.
Yeah.
Let's see. Hold on. What favorite type of pizza?
Pepperoni, with extra pepperoni.
Yes.
In fact, that's what I had for dinner tonight. So that was a nice coincidence.
Okay, so again, no chains are sponsoring this, but I want to know, where'd you get it from? What's the go-to local, and what's the go-to chain for you?
Well, I think go-to chain for me would be Papa Murphy's. I'm not sure. I mean, the thing with pizza is I can't really say why I prefer it, but I just do. Something about it that I prefer Papa Murphy's. Or I'm sorry, not Papa Murphy's. I get Papa John's. John's, not Papa Murphy's. Papa Murphy's take and bake. So Papa John's. Local, Sloan's Calzones And Brent Sloan, if you're watching, I'll give him a shout out. I love that place. They're a local in Decatur. They actually had shut down because of COVID. I think they've reopened. I haven't been there since they've reopened, but that's definitely my go-to local.
Do you go for calzone the same way you go for a pizza? Pepperoni calzone, pepperoni pizza?
They're kind of one and the same to me. I mean, they're basically calzone's just basically a
Folded
pizza
pizza.
folded over. So,
Yeah.
but they also have great sandwiches too. So they got more than just pizza.
Nice. I'm hungry now. Thanks a lot, man. I did that to myself. Dumbest thing you ever did to impress a girl?
Well, I don't know if it was dumb. I probably didn't impress her.
Okay.
I don't know. I'd probably have to ask my wife. She could probably tell you what the dumbest thing I did.
I like it.
But I don't know, because like I said, if it was dumb, it probably didn't impress her.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? Now that I think about it,
Okay.
I will say this. My wife would probably answer this. We were working when I proposed to my wife. We were working in Mooresville, North Carolina, to George Pappas's place. That's where last time I saw Guppy Troop. George Pappas's place, which, by the way, that's the only place in the world where you can put wrecked cars on the wall in a bowling center and it looks cool. So George Pappas, that bowling
Victory
center,
Lane.
Victory Lanes. Yes.
Yep.
If you've ever been there, he's got the inside walls are all lined with wrecked fenders and bumpers and NASCAR, because that's NASCAR headquarters, or there's a lot of NASCAR shops around there. Anyway, we were working in Mooresville. The next day was my wife's birthday, and I wanted to propose to her on her birthday. And I wanted to come home and surprise her. So what I did was, which this was the dumbest thing I've ever done, is we got done with the tournament probably around 10 o'clock that night. So I'd worked all day, 10 o'clock that night. It's about a 17-hour drive, I think, back home. So it was going to take me all night to drive home, and then most of the next day to drive straight through to get home. So I could propose to her that night after she got off work. That was my plan. But I had already been up for like 14 hours, and now I'm going to go try and drive another 16. So I stopped and I got a Monster energy drink and one of those 5-hour energies, and some No-Dos. And let me tell you, No-Dos and 5-hour energy and Monster energy drink together, don't ever do that.
I don't even know what No-Dos. What are those?
That was the No-Dos are the little pills to help you stay awake. They're basically straight caffeine. They're basically straight caffeine. And
Okay.
I was so wired and shaky, and like I was out of my mind trying to drive, and it was absolutely miserable. I don't know if I slept for like 2 days after that. So I guess you would say if that was the dumbest thing I ever did to impress a girl, that had to have been it. And lucky for me, she said yes.
Now, when did you tell her about this? Did you tell her, "Hey, listen, I did this," and then did you?
Well, I told her that night, because she was like, "How did you get home so fast?" Like, because I was supposed to, go back to the hotel and sleep before I came home the next day, and then drive home, which would be, either I get home late that night or the next day, even 2 days later, and I didn't. I pushed through, and that was probably not the safest thing I could have done either.
Yeah, you're around. Favorite subject in school?
Math, statistics, economics, pretty much any subject that had to do with numbers. And I guess that makes sense because I'm a big stats guy anyway. Like my league team probably thinks I'm crazy because I keep track of league stats and win percentages and all those kind of things. I keep track of all that. What our averages are on certain pairs and certain centers and all that stuff. So nice. Yeah, definitely statistics.
So are you let's see, are you a party animal or a quiet night at home kind of person?
Definitely quiet night at home. I am definitely not a party animal. My wife probably thought wishes I was more, but yeah, if I can stay home with a nice glass of wine, that's what I want to do.
Okay. Did you play any other sports growing up?
I did. I played pretty much everything as a kid. I played basketball. I played baseball. I ran track and cross country in high school. So yeah, I did do other sports, but bowling was always my first passion. In fact, I remember my cross country coach in high school pulled me into his office one day, and he gave me this long lecture about how good of a runner I was, and how much potential I had, and how I can go to state, and blah 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 blah. And he ended it with, if you just spent less time bowling and more time training. And I think all I heard after that was
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that conversation was over at that point.
Yep. Okay. Yep. With me too. Definitely. Has anyone ever asked you for your autograph?
Yeah. I remember my first PBA tournament back again, Council Bluffs, and there was a lady there, and she had a black like satin jacket that had, I mean, this thing was covered in signatures. And I think myself and Kirk and Eric Holbein, I think we were all standing together right outside the tournament office, and she came up and asked us all for our autographs. And I remember looking at her like, I'm like, you want my autograph? And she said yes, and that was the first time anybody asked me for an autograph. So that was pretty cool moment there.
Absolutely. So I got a similar story to that. So I'm assuming you saw the 2009 Cheetah Championship with Norm Duke, that bowling documentary that they turned that into.
Well, the 2009 Cheetah Championship, I would have been the tournament director for that tournament.
Right. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, yeah. Well, that is my all-time favorite bowling tournament of all time because of how that was done. And so, Ryan Simonelli, that was the week he was just dominating and finished second, and he's killing it this week. Go Ryan, finish it up, buddy. So his father was interviewed, and they had the Brunswick mini camps in Maine. And so Ryan was there, his father was there, and I asked his father for his autograph, and he's like, "Me? You want me to sign that?" I'm like, "Yeah, you were you were interviewed on the 2009 Cheetah Championship." So he did, and that was really cool. And a shout out to Angelo Simonelli, man. I hope you're doing well. But yeah, that's kind of similar with me there. Are you a coffee or hot chocolate type of person?
Definitely hot chocolate between those two. I don't drink coffee.
You don't drink coffee, not even iced?
Not even iced. I don't like any kind of coffee.
Oh, okay. What is your outlook on life?
I would say that my outlook on life has actually changed a little bit in the last couple of years. Really, don't take anything for granted. Don't take anybody for granted. Don't take what you have. Don't take your family. Make sure you tell your family that you love them every day. Because, I lost my dad, and I were extremely close, and I lost him suddenly. And, I can't change anything in the past. We did have a good relationship, but, there are people out there that, that whole don't go to bed angry kind of philosophy is one you really, really should have. And that's kind of where I look at things now.
Okay. Good advice. Good lessons there. So are you a big bowling alley type of person, or a small, intimate setting? Like, you prefer National Bowling Stadium or Bayside Bowl, the size of Bayside Bowl, or smaller?
I like the hometown feel of the smaller centers, because the little places, especially, last year I bowled full time in the Midwest region, and we got to go to a lot of small centers, and I really like the family atmosphere that they offer. They also generally have better food than the bigger centers.
Okay, yeah,
because it's kind of home cooked kind of food, but I also like the bigger centers, because the bigger centers are usually more modern. They have all the bells and whistles. They got, a lot more, I don't want to say history, because that's probably not the right word, but they have a lot more cachet, if you will, more attraction and things like that to the bigger centers. So I think it really depends. It really depends. They both offer pros and cons.
Okay. Hope your wife doesn't get mad at me for this one. Celebrity crush.
Jennifer Aniston.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Big Friends watcher back in the day?
No, actually, I didn't. I didn't really watch Friends that much, and when I did, it was only to look at Jennifer Aniston's legs. So,
Okay. There we go. That's awesome. Celebrity you'd most like to meet?
Back to what I said before, Bobby Knight.
Okay.
I've got a book of Bobby Knight's, and I've seen so many of his interviews, and never had a chance to meet him. But he's a guy that I really would have loved to have sit down and had a conversation with, and just see what type of person he is. So Bobby Knight for sure.
All right. So what is your favorite toy? And thank you for telling me that this was in there twice. You're dying of thirst. You're absolutely you're so thirsty you can't even stand it. What is your go-to cold beverage?
Dr. Pepper.
Love it.
Dr. Pepper all the way. There's nothing better than a fountain Dr. Pepper.
Here's a question. A fountain. Okay. I was going to ask you, why is it? So when you buy a bottle of Dr. Pepper, because of you, I'm going to go to the convenience store after we're done and get a Dr. Pepper so I can watch the Bruins. When you open the bottle really fast, it fizzes out, no matter if you've shaken it or not. Why is that?
Just the pressure built up in the bottle. Those bottles are pressurized. My dad worked for Pepsi for 25 years. So,
okay.
He's talk a lot about, when people tap the top of the can to, before they open it.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything. It's just time. Anyway, it's just because those bottles are pressurized. So you just got to open them slow and let the gas out slow.
It's the only one though. Pepsi, I can open it regularly. Mountain Dew, Coke.
Oh, I don't have an answer for that then.
Okay. All right. So you're going to nationals and you don't have a team, so you need 5 people for nationals. So I'm going to do this 2 ways. Who's your team? And of those 5 people, who is your doubles partner? Living or dead? Anybody in the world.
So this might have to be one of those politically correct answers again.
Okay.
So when you have 5 on a team, well, let me back up. We'll do this a different way. So you want to talk about my dream team, if you will.
Sure.
Mike Albee, of course, Jason Belmonte, Pete Weber, and my dad. That would be my team. But see, you have 5 people on a team, so you have an odd man out. So my doubles partner would be my good friend Daryl Bean, who I bowl doubles with all the time now. He's my doubles partner, and I definitely would choose Daryl to bowl doubles with if I could. I've had the opportunity to bowl doubles with Pete Weber and Wayne Webb and Tim Mack and some great bowlers, but Daryl Bean's my doubles partner. So shout out to Daryl for being my doubles partner.
So everybody he's giving a shout out to, please like and subscribe. I'm gonna make sure make sure I share this with. I'm going to share those with a lot of these people, because that's awesome. I really appreciate these shout outs. So if Make-A-Wish calls you and says, "Hey Corey, you can," I know that Make-A-Wish is for people with cancer, kids with cancer, and stuff like that. But let's say Make-A-Wish was just like, "Hey, I want to make a random person. I just want to make somebody's wish come true." Make-A-Wish calls you. What? And says he'll grant you anything you want. What is your wish?
Well, it's not something that Make-A-Wish could grant, but it would be to be able to talk to my dad one more time.
Okay.
Like I said, he died suddenly, so I didn't have the chance to say goodbye or have that last conversation with him.
Right. What types of people do you hate bowling with?
I didn't have to think very hard about this one. I hate bowling with people like me.
Okay.
people, if people watch this podcast, they will know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm a very emotional bowler. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I'm very
Yep.
vocal when I bowl. Um, my mouth operates before my brain a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets me in trouble sometimes. And I wish I could kind of rein in my emotions sometimes when I'm bowling, but it just happens. It just comes out. And I'm not one that I don't kick things. You won't see me kick a ball return. You're not going to see me hit. You're not going to see me hit a telescore. That was one thing I really hated when I worked for the PBAs. Guys abusing center equipment.
Oh yeah.
I'm not going to do that at all. But I definitely can be, a little bit too vocal and a little bit too emotional. And I see that in other people when they're bowling, and I see myself, and I don't like that. It is definitely something I try and pay more attention to, but it's a work in progress. So yeah, definitely bowlers like myself.
Okay. Are you somebody that yells, like, if you throw a good shot, are you going to yell carry, or if you if
Yes.
you ever
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
good.
I mean, it's good. It's good and bad. I mean, when I get a good break when I need it, or carry a good shot when I need it, I'm going to slap that off, and I'm going to yell and
Absolutely.
be happy. But it's going to be just as equally, if I get a bad break or solid 8-pin at the wrong time or something, I'm gonna drop an F-bomb when I shouldn't, and or say something that I shouldn't, and that's not good, and I can admit that, but it is definitely something I need to work on,
Mhm.
and that's who I am. That's who I am as a bowler. It's good and bad.
See, I'm the opposite. And I hate bowling with happy-go-lucky people. These people that are like, and I did it last night, and it was frustrating, that don't know bowling as much as you do, and like when you chop a 6-10 and they're like, "Oh, that was so close, buddy," and this and that, and I'm just like, what? And it was just, I don't know. Those are my people that I just can't stand, you
But
know.
that's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
I wish I could be more like that, um, and more receptive to those type of comments.
Yeah. Um, so what is one thing that you will never do, even if I give you $1 trillion?
Root for the Oregon Ducks. That's one thing I won't do.
Okay.
um, I will never cheat on my wife,
Mhm.
and I will never kneel for the national anthem, no matter how much you pay me.
Mhm. Yeah. You're a great guy, Corey. You really are. You know that. I'm glad. It's kind of an unorthodox way that we met, but and I won't get into that. But I mean, I'm really glad we did, and I'm gonna I want to know you for the rest of my life.
I
Um.
appreciate that.
Dark chocolate, white chocolate, or milk chocolate?
Definitely have to go with milk chocolate on that. My wife loves dark chocolate, but I definitely prefer milk chocolate of the three.
Okay. What is on your birthday cake? So if somebody says, "Hey, you can have whatever cake you want," what are you doing?
Well, the question is, what is on your birthday cake? I can tell you it's too many candles. But
Okay.
I'm not really a cake eater. I do like sweets and candy, but when it comes to cake, um, not really picky. So I don't know that I really have a preference when it comes to cake. My wife makes an amazing Heath. Heath, she calls it better than sex cake. So Heath bar, whipped cream. That's what I would have.
All right. So my address is, can she mail me one tomorrow? Overnight it. Um, because I mean, I like cake, and if she makes a good cake, you know, that'd be cool.
My wife's a phenomenal cook. I always say that it's her fault that I've gained 30 pounds since I met her, because I can't stop eating her food.
Yeah, I'm putting this on my father. I think my father is an amazing cook, and look, I'm gonna blame my weight on him as well. So there you go. So if you could go on any game show, what would it be?
Well, I can answer this because I have been on a game show, and it would be the Newlywed Game with my wife.
Uh-huh.
So we were on the Newlywed Game that was back in 2012 with Sherry Shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't win. I'll take the
Mm-hmm.
credit for losing, although I think my wife helped. But
Mm-hmm.
it was an amazing experience. Wish we could have a couple of the questions back, but yeah, it was Newlywed Game was a blast.
Yeah. That is awesome. Well, Corey, listen, man, thank you so much. I hope I didn't embarrass you at all or too much or anything like that, man. It was really good. Thank you so much for doing this.
If you don't mind, I would like to share one more story.
Go right ahead.
You were talking about favorite moments when I worked for the PBA, and there's one that definitely stood out, and I don't know why I didn't mention it before, but it was the Cheetah Championship in Buffalo, New York.
Mm-hmm.
It must have been the 2008-9 season because it was the 50th anniversary season. And we had on display that year, every tournament, we had many artifacts from PBA history. We
Mm-hmm.
had Harry Golden's medallion, who was the tournament director for a long time for the PBA.
Mm-hmm.
We had pieces of the broken trophy that Pete Weber dropped.
Mm-hmm.
We had the $1 million ball that Earl Anthony used when he won $1
Really?
million. We
Wow.
had, and we had, I mean, there were quite a few artifacts on display, but one of them was Del Ballard's gutter ball.
Oh.
So when Del Ballard threw the gutter ball against Pete, he walked away. Like when the ball came back, like Del Ballard never picked up the ball. Like he just abandoned the ball. And we had one of our employees then, of course, that was before I worked for the PBA,
Mm-hmm.
picked up the ball and kept it. And he had it for all these years. So when we went on tour, we asked if we could borrow the ball and put it on display. Well, in the Cheetah Championship, Del Ballard was trying to make it through our PTQ rounds. So he was trying to bowl his way into the tournament. And that was, kind of when urethane was kind of starting to make it back onto the scene
Mm-hmm.
as far as tournaments go. And Dell was really struggling. And it was, he had bowled a couple of games and he didn't have urethane. He didn't have a look and he was struggling. He came up to me and he's like, am I allowed to throw that hammer? And I'm like the hammer that's in the display case. He's like, yeah. He's like, I need urethane, and I don't have any urethane. And I was like, well, I mean, I guess it's your ball. It's product registered. It's it's legal. So we got it out of the display case. He switched out the grips because it still had the original grips in it, and he went on a run. And he went on the run the next 3 games, throwing the blue hammer, and he ended up missing that cut by 11 pins.
Mm-hmm.
And when he got done bowling, he came back. He brought it back to us. We put it back in the display case, and the rest is history. So if you ever get a chance to talk to Del Ballard,
I'm
who I
working
would
on it.
highly recommend if he's able with his health issues, but if he's able, he will tell you that story probably a lot better than I could.
So, if you've got time, I got a Del Ballard story for you. When I was first watching the PBA, my teacher's last name was Ballard, and then also, so when I first saw Del Ballard, I was like, he was one of my favorite bowlers because of not because of just his last name, but because of his style. Like I love guys that hold the ball down low for some reason. Tony Westlake, Marshall Holman, guys like that. And I met Del Ballard in 1999 at the U.S. Open, and I said, man, I was a fan of you. I remember you from when I first started watching bowling. He goes, "You're not that old," and I was 18 at the time. And I was like, that was better than him giving me an autograph, which he did. And then when I saw him in 2015, I remembered him. Because I have, unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, I have a PBA memory that is longer than 1 million national bowling stadiums. Okay. It just is for some reason. And I brought that up to him. He's like, yeah, you're still not that old. And so when I asked him to be on here, he actually said, yeah, he was all about it. He's like, oh yeah, man. Uh, but hey, can my wife help me? Because I don't know if people understand me. I don't know if people think I'm relevant. And I'm like, man, you know, if as long as I breathe air, you will always be as relevant as Jason Belmonte, because Del Ballard is in my heart forever. And when you watch him bowl on TV, even on today it's going to be on YouTube, because that's how you can watch Del Ballard bowl. And you listen to him talk back then, you never had any inkling that he was going to suffer the way he did in his life. But he's a tough animal, and he is still going strong. And Del, if you ever watch this, I love you with all my heart as a fan. Everybody that knows you loves you. We can't wait to have you on here.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. He's, you talked about Mike Albee and Parker being good guys. He's right in that mix too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, when I first started this podcast, I'll let you go in a second. When I first started this podcast, I thought the only person that would interview that would allow me to talk to them would be Parker Bone. Thank you for your time. Thank you you could do anything else on a Thursday night, and you chose to sit down with me. And I don't take that for granted, man. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for this.
My pleasure.
And this has been Flush in the Pocket. And Corey, we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Great. Thank you. Have a great night.
You too, buddy.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. So that was Corey Kistner, former PBA tournament director. Coming up, we don't have anything for this Saturday. So it looks like our next show will be next Saturday. I got to work on it. And it's going to be Eric Forkel next Saturday at 8:00. So it's going to be a great show. And we'll talk to Eric about his amazing PBA career. So be on the lookout for that. And this has been Flush in the Pocket, presented by Brunswick Bowling. Thank you so much to Brunswick for being so nice to me throughout my life. Just not just this, but in the years that we've known about each other. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who is watching. Have a great night, and I will talk to you next week.